Hi, I'm Ethan Wong, and today I'm here speaking with Sainey Ceesay.
Hi everyone.
All right.
Um,
Oh, you can introduce yourself a little
okay.
bit.
Hi, my name is Sainey Ceesay, and I am the 2021 Prince George's County Youth Poet Laureate, and I'm also a student at Prince George's Community College, and a member of the DMV Slam team as well with Frisbees in Life.
Great. Congratulations, and we'll get into the questions. So, what really kind of is special to you about poetry, and is the reason you write poetry as to write any other form of fiction or any other art form?
What I really enjoy for me about poetry is one, just how accessible it seems. I feel like you can write a poem from anywhere, any place. It doesn't require a lot of like physical materials, as long as you have like a pen and a paper or, your notes app or just like you have a good memory, like you can get a poem started. And it feels like it kind of has a lower barrier of entry to me, I guess, in the sense that I can, I feel comfortable starting a poem from anywhere in any place and just knowing that it can evolve from there into anything that I need it to be. And also, to me, it's just therapeutic. I think one of the reasons that I started writing poetry was just because I had a lot of pent up emotions. And it was just one of the easiest ways for me to get that out and to make sense of what I was feeling. And also, just like the beauty and the imagery of poetry, and also sometimes the kind of abstractness of language and the different forms that it can take when it exists within a poem. I feel like I'm someone who kind of exists a lot of like on the subconscious and the emotional level. So sometimes writing poems are an easier way for me to be able to kind of articulate myself and like allow me to explain things in a way that I feel like just speaking regularly doesn't always give me the space to explain.
Yeah, I
So
think. Oh, sorry, continue.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to agree with everything you said because I definitely a lot of it is about that kind of in the spur nature of poetry that I can take on, which is in the spur of the moment, sorry, which is I could be anywhere and it's very easy to just feel something and then decide I'm going to write a poem about it, as opposed to if I'm like writing something long form, then it's most likely something where I need to dedicate the specific time to like sit down in front of my desk and then write it all out or kind of be in a specific environment, not like it's just kind of different with poetry. And a lot of it is about that emotion you're talking about. And so something I wanted to add on to that is I've had varying answers for this, but were you always kind of a reader of poetry and then change into a writer, or did you start your interaction with poetry by writing poetry?
I was definitely a reader first. I always enjoyed poetry, or I enjoyed poetry from a younger age. When I was in about the second grade, I read like a biography on Maya Angelou, and I started reading her works and just kind of fell in love with poetry from there. But I never really thought that like I could be a poet or see myself that way necessarily. I think I really started to write more seriously around the age of 13. And that was when I was kind of introduced to slam poetry. And I would just like listen to a lot of slam poets. And at first, that was kind of a way for me to kind of gain, I guess, a sense of comfort in their words and just like being able to articulate and talk about different experiences that we don't often just kind of talk about conversationally, or that can seem like kind of taboo or just um not easily accepted in regular conversation. And that kind of gave me the bravery to say that I can kind of tell my own stories and I can talk about all of these things and like how I feel about it and the things that are like sitting inside of me, and not um, to feel like bad or ashamed about what I was thinking and feeling. And I think eventually I just kind of moved from that space of um, looking to other people's words for comfort, which I still do, but to know that I can also write those kinds of poems for myself. And it was a very personal thing for a long time. I mean, I've kind of grown out of it, but like I was a very shy person, and so it kind of started out as being kind of like a diary kind of thing, like just writing my thoughts and emotions and using that as an outlet and a way for me to kind of heal and comfort myself. Um, but then I started to, I guess, become more confident, and that's when I would share out my poems and like with people that I trusted. And then once I had like more reassurance, that's when I really started to take it more serious.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing, is to have that kind of reassurance. And then because you want the poetry to kind of start from that place of you're just expressing yourself and doing it for yourself. And then that evolution becomes kind of natural in that sense, that you share it because you feel more confident about yourself as well.
Yeah.
And something I wanted to add on to that question is, with all of that said, what kind of themes do you generally explore in your poetry then?
So one of the working themes that I've discovered often like repeats itself in my work is just sitting with myself, like in moments of stillness, and the kind of emotions that come up within the body, and kind of identifying them and where they come from and how they sit in the body, and kind of trying to listen to what my body is telling me and what that means to be experiencing those emotions as they kind of happen. Um, and I also just write about like the ways that I am perceived for having the body that I have and for moving through the world in the way that I do, and how that all kind of intersects and, you know, finds itself in the ways that I kind of see myself and feel about myself on an emotional level as well. So it's kind of all of those things working at once, like the internal processes of having a body and like the external, and how people kind of react to that, and how my life is shaped by having the body that I have, you know.
Yeah. And to tag on to that, I guess, how do you think this theme that you've been, or these themes, I guess, that you've been pursuing now are still very much the same as the ones you started off with when you were writing, or when you very first started writing, I guess I should say?
Yeah, my first poems, honestly, they were pretty like angsty. Like I want to say my first poems were kind of like love poems, and like, yeah, just somewhat depression poems, or just kind of being able to admit things to myself that I didn't feel comfortable or safe admitting anywhere else. And honestly, yes, that those types of things do still find their way in my writing, but I guess in different ways. Um, yeah, I feel like it's kind of evolved a bit. I do still write on those topics, but I think I also have gone from writing about like my internal processes and how like I deal with my emotions, to also thinking more outwardly, I guess, and to how I'm perceived, and then even how that can connect to larger social issues. Um, I kind of find it interesting, like a lot of poems that I would write, like just talking about different experiences I have in the world, actually have a lot to do with like sociology and theory, but it was just like things that I was just kind of picking up on an emotional level. So it's kind of interesting how it can resonate in those ways too.
Yeah. And you mentioned about how you can write a poem just anywhere. So I assume that has something to do with you being inspired by something around you or something you see. So, or not necessarily, but that's just what I kind of got from it. So
Yeah.
then my question would be, what are the kinds of things that generally inspire you to write?
I would say one, like processing emotions and like sometimes like trauma, sometimes like collective issues and grief, sometimes just love and existing in a moment and using poetry as my way of trying to preserve that and to keep that for myself so that I don't forget the things that are precious to me and just kind of trying to collect those moments and those memories in a way that's like I want to listen to my body and I want to listen to the things that are happening around me and I want to memorialize them in a way that I won't be able to forget them later. So I think poetry really gives me the ability to do that in a way that is non-intimidating and because a lot of times these poems can be things that I'm able to just kind of keep for myself or decide to share when I feel, comfortable doing so. But I think that's my personal relationship to my poems and why I write.
Okay. Yeah. I think every time we kind of talk about it, I hear a lot about you wanting to memorialize things, you want to talk about the experience of living. And I think that is at some kind of core level very important in poetry, is just to kind of touch a concept as much as you can whenever you write about it. And I think for a lot of people that might be different other things, but for you, I guess it would be that main core experience. And so it's about time we can get into your poem now.
Okay, great. Um, this poem is titled Apology Letter to My Body and Anyone Else Whose Love Has Been Constant. It's a really long title, but it also the first line of the poem. So, apology letter to my body and anyone else whose love has been constant. Finding my way back to myself has been like clawing in the dark and validating has only been me shouting I am to my anxieties, and I found that not operating on mute takes more than an affirmation, takes a conjuring of bones to dance in divine order, and claiming my place has been like a fight of swords, of deciphering between hands that want to choke out my voice and those that only want to hold my own, and it's been too long before I learned the difference. So I'm sorry I haven't been showing up. Sorry I've been undermining all the ways you've only wanted to help me heal, turn my body into a crimson lined canvas just to map out the hurt in a way that I can trace. Sorry that I've been spending more time than I can justify, staring into cracked mirrors, refracted images that never gave me honest and honesty, not sure why I sat and listened for this long, but actually I've just been accustomed to fogginess, to drowning, to shadow side toxic, to looking for something to wear on my skin that feels worthy enough to cover all this inadequate sorry about all the poison I allowed to occupy a body that only wants to do everything it can to keep me alive, denied its ability to perform alchemy, to get me to wake up being the exact same person feels a bit like magic. I know that you are a magician. Take this bone and this blood and this hurt and have it hold itself like a home, present its space like a girl to whisper a death wish, to hold it close like a small hope, speak it softly so it can grow wings, reach my angels like maybe they'll find it okay to persuade God and tell her it's time I come home to my body. I'm sorry. because all you've ever offered me was wholeness. Whole is all I could ever be, even when everything screams broken. Sorry that I didn't call the depression by its name each time I felt it, buried it under tiredness and wishaways and too many excuses. Sorry, I haven't been showing up, been more shadow than girl, been creeping around these walls like a ghost or a spirit that only has eyes and no motive. Been too many things I don't recognize. It's not to say that the battle is over, but an explanation for the way that I seem to keep shrinking the first time. You may hear this in this poem, so I'm sorry that I've only given you a poem apology.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Do you have any like last bits of advice for anyone who wants to try to write poetry?
Um, I would say that don't get too caught up in like writing something amazing, because I think the process of writing a poem is also just as important as the poem itself. Like the most important thing about a poem is what it does for you. So I would say if you have something on your heart or on your spirit that you just need to let out, like don't limit yourself in expressing that, and really give yourself the space to write just whatever it is that you're thinking and feeling, and don't be like the first person to judge yourself, you know? And
Yeah.
yeah. And also just like something that's become more apparent to me, especially in writing and sharing poems, like every emotion that there is to experience in the world has been felt by someone else. So there's somebody who's going to feel you. So don't feel alone in thinking or feeling the way that you do, and give yourself that space to express it.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This was a lovely interview.